In Russia, murderers and rapists are returning from war without a term, without supervision, without breaks, with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. According to the Washington Post, criminals pardoned for participating in the war with Ukraine are returning home and starting to kill again. Russia has become the only country in modern Europe where participation in the war has become an official way to avoid prison for murder, rape, and torture. Since 2022, thousands of prisoners, including especially dangerous criminals, have been recruited into the army with the promise of freedom in exchange for service in assault units. The survivors are released and return. As the Washington Post reports, criminals who have been through the front are committing new crimes en masse in peaceful Russian cities. There is no rehabilitation system. There is no psychological support. There is no control. There is only a knife, PTSD, and impunity. On February the 9th, 2025, in Achinsk, a man stabbed his ex-wife's new partner to death and then tried to kill her himself. CCTV footage showed Kirill Chepligin, who had previously been convicted of violence, chasing the woman across a playground and stabbing her in the neck. Chepligin had previously applied to participate in combat operations to avoid imprisonment, a common procedure in Russia in recent years. The city's residents are in panic. Chepligin, like hundreds of others, could return home with weapons, combat experience, and hatred without trial or time. A petition has already been launched against his possible return, but under conditions of militarized censorship, it is unlikely to be heard. According to the independent publication Verstka, since the beginning of the war, at least 754 people have fallen victim to violence by former military personnel, 196 of whom have been killed, and 76 of the murders were committed not by former prisoners but by contract soldiers who returned from the combat zone. In reality, journalists believe these figures are several times higher. The state is diligently erasing the traces of the heroes of the SVO. According to the Interior Ministry, there were 617,301 violent crimes registered in Russia last year, the highest number since 2014, and analysts say the culture of crime and impunity in the Russian military likely plays a major role in the rise in crime. That compares with 437,000 in 2017. Experts directly attribute this to the return of war veterans who have learned one thing: how to kill. In kitchens and closed chats, restrained rage is increasingly heard. People whose loved ones have fallen victim to the released killers no longer believe that what is happening is a coincidence. They are starting to curse Putin, realizing that it was he who opened the cage. It was he who made violence part of state policy. And although a direct charge can lead to a prison term, a terrible silent hatred is brewing inside Russia for the one who allowed the streets to be turned into a battlefield. The front has its own laws. Russian independent media and military bloggers report commanders zero soldiers, sending them on obviously deadly missions or simply kill them. Soldiers are put in earthen pits, tied to trees, beaten. Discipline is based on fear and pain. The command is corrupt. Drug addiction, drunkenness, corruption, rape, arms trafficking and extortion have become the norm. The soldiers who survive this return not as heroes, but as mentally broken machines of violence, unable to adapt to the world.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continued talks with officials in Prague on Monday, meeting with Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala. According to Associated Press, Zelensky had met with Czech President Petr Pavel and his wife Eva a day earlier. During the joint press conference on Monday, Fiala highlighted the cooperation of the two nations and called for its deepening. We agreed today that we will focus together with our partners in the Coalition of the Willing on training Ukrainian pilots. That is very important. The training of Ukrainian pilots on Il-39s and F-16s will take place here in the Czech Republic, he said. Zelensky also met with the Speaker of both chambers of parliament on Monday. The visit comes amid Russia's announcement of a 72-hour ceasefire next week in Ukraine to mark Victory Day in World War II. Zelensky instead renewed calls for a more substantial 30-day pause in hostilities, as the U.S. had initially proposed. He said the proposed ceasefire could start any time as a meaningful step toward ending the war.
Pokud jde o vojenskou spolupráci, tak my jsme připraveni ještě prohloubit náš podíl na výcviku ukrajinských vojáků. Dnes jsme se domluvili, že se zaměříme společně s partnery z koalice ochotných na výcvik ukrajinských pilotů. To je velmi důležité. Výcvik ukrajinských pilotů na letadlech Il-39, ale i na letadlech F-16. A to tady v České republice výcvik může probíhat například v Náměšti.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Prague on Sunday for high-level talks with Czech officials. According to Associated Press, Zelensky was greeted by Czech President Petr Pavel at Prague Castle, where the pair inspected the Czech honor guard. The visit comes amid Russia's announcement of a 72-hour ceasefire next week in Ukraine to mark Victory Day in World War II. It also follows comments made by Russian President Vladimir Putin to state television that the need to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine had not arisen and that he hopes it will not. Zelensky said Friday, in comments made public Saturday, that Moscow's Victory Day ceasefire announcement is merely an attempt to create a soft atmosphere ahead of Russia's annual celebrations. Zelensky instead renewed calls for a more substantial 30-day pause in hostilities, as the U.S. had initially proposed. He said the proposed ceasefire could start any time as a meaningful step toward ending the war.